Thank you. Please be seated.
Good morning. I don't know why, but I feel bad bringing a cup of coffee up here, but a bottle of water I'm okay with. So I'm excited to be here this morning, excited to at least give you some ideas, some thoughts that I've heard. These aren't my own, trust me. I'm not that deep of a theologian, but I do like to listen to different podcasts, for different sermons from different people. As I study, as I exercise, as I do whatever outside. And this is one of those. How many visitors do we have here this morning? Raise your hands. Anybody? Okay, good. Because this is kind of a Sunday night sermon. We don't have Sunday night services here, so I'm going to kind of blend it in here this morning a bit. And I'm going to set my timer because my eyes are terrible. So we'll set this for what time do y'all want to get out of here? I'll leave it to y'all. How about, 10:15? Okay, we'll do 10:15. Let's do about 10:45 maybe. If we're lucky, there we go. If it goes off, I'm in trouble. We're going to kind of take a 10,000-foot view of God, the Bible, and His plan this morning, of what He has and of what the grand theme, the grand idea, I guess, is what I want to do. What's God up to? And I'm going to start by reading Joshua chapter 2, verse 24. It says this. So they said to Joshua, "The Lord has surely given the whole land into our hands. All the people are melting in fear because of us." And over in Joshua chapter 10, it kind of goes through the conquest of Canaan. I mean, it starts after chapter 2, but with the fall of Jericho, all that stuff. But I just want to hit some high points in here. I guess I'm going to skip through different verses, so but it starts in verse 29. I'm just going to hit a few words here. Then Joshua and all of Israel with him moved on from Makediah to Libnah and attacked it. The Lord also gave the city and its kings into Israel's hand. The city and everyone in it Joshua put to the sword. He left no survivors there. And he did to its kings as he had done to the kings of Jericho. And it keeps going down. The same thing happens in verses 31 through 33. Meanwhile, Horam, king of Gezer, had come up to help Lishkosh, but Joshua defeated him and his army until no survivors were left. So in conquering the land of Canaan, God told them, leave no survivors. Kill everything. And I guess I can't imagine having that. I mean, killing animals, babies, women, children, men, everything. I guess the question that I have, or that's been kind of posed to me, is what's this all about? Why that piece of land? Why not settle somewhere else where it's a little easier? I mean, I'm not sure whose wagon train stopped here, but I want to kick him in the chin sometimes. Farming's hard here, isn't it, Dan? We do have some good water underground, but it doesn't rain like it does other places, except every 30 years or 40 years like it did this week. But why this piece of land? Why is God so interested in this piece of land? And I've got a map behind us. I just noticed it's on the screen now. This is a map that gives us a picture of the civilized world at the time. You'll see, I guess I'll try to read that down there. Egypt, you'll see Rome up north. You'll see Assyria, the Mediterranean Sea, Arabian Desert, where there's really nothing during this time there at all. But you'll see lots of different pieces of land around there. But why does he want Israel to settle in that little piece of grass right there. You can see it just right beside Israel, I guess, the word Israel. You'll see that little chunk of grass right there. Why is that so important to God? The historians during this time have called that little piece of grass the crossroads of the earth. That's kind of what I've taught this lesson, the crossroads of the earth. It's the turnstile of the ancient world. If you wanted to go anywhere in the ancient world, you had to cross through that piece of land. If you're walking, if you're going around, there's actually a highway that goes through that land that splits out into 2 or 3 different thoroughfares. And I'm reading this off the notes I've written. That currently goes through ancient Turkey. The main highway goes north and south. If any commerce was going to take place, any global connection on any level, particularly commercial, but let alone travel of any sort, you're going to go through that piece of land during that time frame. It was the most prized piece of real estate. Because if you wanted to control trade, you wanted that piece of land. It was the place to be because you were in the middle of it all. Let's turn to Genesis real quick, chapter 22. What did God tell Abraham he was going to do through him? I kind of wish this was a teaching class, not just a sermon, but in chapter 22 of Genesis, verses 17 and 18, it says this: I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sand on the seashore. Your descendants will take possession of the cities of their enemies, and through your offspring, all nations on earth will be blessed because you have obeyed me. So what did God tell Abraham he was going to do through him? He was going to bless all nations through him. Now, if that's still God's mission at this time, where do you think God's going to want to put his people, Abraham's descendants, so they can bless all nations? In the middle of everything. In the middle of everything in the ancient world at that time. And how many nations is descendants going to bless? What's it say? All nations, not just a few, not just the red, white, and blue, not just Israel, but all nations. So he's probably not going to put them over in a corner, not going to put them in the Arabian desert, not just south of Egypt, not north of Egypt. He's going to put them in the middle of everything at that point in time. He's going to put his priest in the middle of everything. What's Torah? You know what Torah is? It's the first 5 books of the Bible. That's what people. That's what they call Torah. It's the law, pretty much. And in Torah, what's brought up a lot? I'm going to answer the question, of course, but what's God looking for? God's looking for a partner. Moses, Abraham, they all fell in with God. They all partnered with God in what he was doing. It's very missional at that point in time. So God's putting everything, his people, right in the middle of where they need to be for the ancient world, for his people to bless the ancient world. And think about this: where did God put the tabernacle when they were going through the desert? In the middle of camp. So, if you're thinking about where's the priesthood going to be, it's going to be right smack dab in the middle of it all. That's where God put his people. That's where God needs his priesthood. That's where God needs everybody that's going to have access to his priesthood at that point in time. Now, let's go to another map. And they're going to have to help me a little bit because this is a PDF file. And every now and then, well, do I point up, down, sideways? Oh, there we go. Thank you. Okay, there's the 12 tribes of Israel when they crossed the Jordan. That's where they landed. So, except one. Who do you not see up there? It's the Levites. They're the priesthood. They're the ones that aren't listed up there, but they don't have an inheritance. But God gave every tribe, a particular piece of real estate. Everybody got a piece of the pie. Everybody got a piece of the mission. They weren't just placed in different places just because that's what they wanted. They were put there specifically for a mission. Everybody got a piece of the land there. So the next slide, maybe. There we go. This is a slide of just kind of a functional slide. And I'm going to kind of walk you through. To the north, you've got Galilee. Now, honestly, the Israelites probably didn't want to be on the coast. They'd spent most of their life in Egypt. They weren't really water people, I don't think. Israelites wanted to be more in the, I can't even read it, Judea Mountains is where they wanted to reside, honestly, kind of up and out of the way, away from the pagans. And that's where they wanted to settle there because they didn't really like water, honestly. Now, the coastal plains were filled with pagans. Who had that area? Mainly the Philistines were kind of down in that area. So, but God put them in that specific place so they could be in the middle of everything, the good and the bad. So he could have influence so that the priests, the Levites, God's people could have influence on the people of the time. That's why he put them there. I'll go through this a little quicker. We might say, and this is something that I've heard before. Let's invade the empire and the imperial narrative of the world with the kingdom of God. What's invading? Are we influencing the world, or is the world influencing us? God wanted his people to influence the world, not the other way around. That's why he put them where he put them. And God doesn't want us really in a safe, holy huddle. Sometimes we think, well, if we just pull away from everything, have our own language, have our own songs, our own music, have our own, this is a big one, Christian schools, private schools where we send our kids, they'll be a little better than the other kids because they're learning the solid stuff. What does that do to the ones we're leaving behind in the public? And that's, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, I'm just saying think about it. It's a different, God doesn't call us to separate ourselves completely from where we're planted. And what's the danger in doing that? We're no longer doing the thing that God has called us to do, which is to shine the light in dark places. Okay. Next slide. This is something that have y'all heard of this, a tell? I had never heard of a tell. Greg's shaking his head. It's just city built upon city built upon city. Back in Israel, there wasn't much land. So when a city would get conquered, destroyed, it'd be in ruins for 300, 400, 80 years, 100 years, whatever. Then eventually someone would build on top of it. Why? Because land's pretty spare, good farmland and good water sources are kind of hard to find, I would think, in that area. So they would build on top of the city, and as the archaeologists excavate these cities, they find city gates, they find artifacts. And let's go to the next one. That's a picture of a tell. I guess it's just a mound of dirt, the city that's been unexcavated. Next slide, please. That's another picture of it. Keep going. There's the city. Now, when you build a city, what do you want to do first? You want to build a wall. Wall is very important in that day and age. And if you build a wall, what do you have to have after that? Got to have a gate. Don't have a gate, you can't get in the city. And as they started doing these digs, these archaeological digs, they started finding, there's more advanced gates. The older the cities, or I guess the newer the cities are. The first gate would have, if you'll go a slide or two forward, okay, that's right there, that's a good one. They would have these side doors at the gates where the guards would stand, and people couldn't get in. If they attacked them, they couldn't get in. They would the bodies would pile up there, and they would plug the hole eventually. But they started making city gates with 6 or 7, 8 different holes for guards to stand where eventually they became impenetrable. So what happened next is they started to have sieges in cities that they built siege ramps. They just go over the wall. And that's what this displays. Keep going, one more. That's good. And then look at that picture there. That's a picture of a city gate at the bottom of the hill. But also in the middle of that picture, you'll see a trench. That's where this raw sewage would go down the hill and out. Every couple hours, they would flush the raw sewage out of the city. Now, what I want to get into now is the way the city was built. They had the wall, and the wall is where Rahab lived, the prostitute. That was your middle class. The middle class lived inside the wall. Where do you think the upper class lived? In the middle of the city. The priests, the kings, the royalty lived inside the city. You know what? I don't know where I'm at anymore in my notes. I'm just talking right now. So, the royalty lived inside the city walls, sorry. Middle class lived inside the walls. And when the city would be attacked every 80, 100 years, whatever, to forge off attackers, they would just fill those rooms with rocks. The walls, I guess, where people lived, they put rocks in the rooms. They'd make an 8-foot wall impenetrable. But what I'm trying to get at is outside the walls is where the poor people lived. That's where the ones that couldn't afford to live inside the city lived. And then you also have your destitute that lived even beyond that, where the trash heap was. The sewage, that line that you see out there, that's where they poured their trash too. They would take the trash outside the city gates into this dump and burn it. So you got raw sewage mixed with trash, mixed with fire. And that's kind of where we get the image of weeping and gnashing of teeth, of that image of just of the underworld, really. I don't want to say the word, but of where we don't want to go. So that's a picture of who makes up the city. Now at the city gates, what happened at the city gates? That's where your judge, that's where your representatives were. Your kings, your judges, anyone who was anybody was at the city gates. That's where laws were met. That's where everybody met. Who was anybody? So it was a very important piece of real estate as well. And also what happened at the city gates, that's where they distributed food to the poor. If you couldn't take care of your poor, the people inside the city would take their stuff that they didn't want and give to the poor who were outside the city. And it's funny that in this study, it talked about the people who lived outside the city. Those villages outside the gates were called daughters. And that struck a chord to me. As Jesus is going to the cross, what's he say? Daughters of Jerusalem, don't weep for me, I think, something like that. He's not just talking about, females. He's talking about these little villages the daughters, the very poor, don't weep for me, is a reference to them as well. I got to find my place now because I'm just going to keep talking. Yeah, that's where I'm at. And it's funny that the stock exchange in Israel currently is called a shara, which is the word for gate. So they still use these words currently. So you've got your middle class people in the wall, have their apartments there. You got your upper crust people inside, deep inside the city, and you've got your poor people outside the city. Let's go to this one. I'm going too fast now. So let's go forward a slide if we can. Keep going. That'll work right there. So you've got the trash dump out there. You've got the sewer line, the water sources. And then turn to Matthew chapter 5. You got turn to Matthew 5, verses 13 through 16. You got this picture in your mind of a till, or a tell, whatever you want to call it. Matthew 5:13 says this: "You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and be trampled by men. You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before men, that they may see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven." Jesus says you are the salt of the earth. You're the light of the world, a city on a hill. So you know what that looks like. You have a picture of a city on a hill. What Jesus is saying, if you're poor, what does the city on the hill represent? If you're a poor person in this day or in another day, what's it represent? The city on the hill represents people that have more than enough to the poor. And they would bring their more than enough to the city gates to distribute those items to the poor. I'm sure there's also some jealousy involved with that too. I'm going to read this because I don't want to mess this up. The city gates, the city on a hill, is your picture of hope. When Jesus says to the people in the Sermon on the Mount, he says, "Well, you're the salt of the earth. You're the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden." He's saying you're the hope of the earth. The earth looks to you, the world looks to you to find shalom in their chaos, to find peace. That's what that word means. That again becomes the same picture of what God is wanting to do with his people at the crossroads. He's putting his people, Israelites in Canaan, at the crossroads of the earth so that they can be the light of the world. They can be the city on a hill. They can be a kingdom of priests. He's putting them right in the middle of it all so that the world can look to them for their hope. I want that to sink in a minute and then bring us forward. Who are the people putting their hope in Hooker, Oklahoma? I guess is where I want to go with this a bit. Because God has put us here in the middle of everything, in the middle of no man's land, to bring hope to this community and to this region. I want to go back to another slide or go forward. Oh, is that it? No, what was that one? Okay. Let's go back to this slide. This is the first or second slide I showed you guys. It shows 12 tribes, the 12 tribes of Israel. Everybody has their own piece of land. Everybody has their own mission. God has a mission for each one of them. Where's Dan on this slide? I'm sorry, no, Dan's right. Sorry, I looked at Dan. I said Dan, I looked right at him. He's right there. But where's the other Dan? Where's the tribe of Dan? You kind of see it just above Judah. Do you think Dan was just put there because that's how much land they need? That's just kind of, that's the amoeba image that fit them? Dan's chunk of dirt, where they're put, also bordered the Philistines. So God had him there for a reason, to influence the Philistines. And who backed up Dan? There's a big brother there, Judah. Judah carries some weight in the tribes and in the region at that time. So, let's switch slides real quick. Let's go up one more. There we go, right there. Eventually, Dan got tired of being attacked by the Philistines, I believe, or got tired of their mission. Where's Dan now? I know Dan's sitting there, but the 12 tribes, Dan, up north, very top. They moved. They moved out of their mission. So who are they sitting next to now? Naphtali, the big tribe of Naphtali. I bet they're pretty good. Let me tell you this. Eventually, Dan got pummeled out of existence because what's above Dan? We showed on the first slide. You've got Rome. You've got the Persians. You've got everything. All these other countries above them, empires, that came in. Oh, you're moving the slides, okay? And attacked Dan out of existence, right there, the very first slide. So eventually Dan's no more. Dan was out of God's mission. But a little tip, if you're looking in Revelation, someone else takes Dan's place. So that's some homework for you. I'm not going to spoil the surprise, but there's another tribe that took the place of Dan. So go back to the last slide I was at, if you don't mind. So, what's the implication of Dan? If you don't seize the mission of God, if you don't realize what God's called you to do and fulfill your role, you may lose your part in the whole story altogether. I guess this is a long-winded way. I wanted y'all to see, and I've got plenty of time left to ramble on. I kind of walked you through the territory at the time. Why God picked that place? Why did God pick Canaan? Why, really, why? It could have been anywhere else in that time. He could have taken his people, but that's where his people were going to be in the middle of everything. And that's where God wanted his people to be, in the middle of everything, to influence the culture, the society at that time, to be a light, to be salt, to be a city on a hill. And that's what God, and I love Steve. I mean, Steve, you really, there you are. You didn't know it, but you walked right into this lesson from the very beginning. And that's what we're called to be here in Hooker, Oklahoma. A light, a city on a hill. And it's also a warning, I think, that if we're not in the mission of God, if we forsake our mission, we may just lose the whole story. I say that, the reason I say this is I know churches that are closing right now. And I know, y'all know one that's closed 10 miles down the road. And I don't want that to be this one. So let's engage in God's story. Let's be that mission. Let's be that city on the hill. And let's, I guess, shake things up in Hooker. I don't know how else to say it. Get back to why God's put us here, honestly. The alarm's not going to go off. I'm sorry, folks. I'm done. I've got 10 minutes to spare, so I'll let y'all have that back. If there's anything we can do for anybody, any prayers needed? Any encouragement? Please come forward while we stand and sing.